Lisa, what's happening?
Well, we're about 60 miles or so from Baghdad. We are on the main supply route north. Really, when you see it, a huge war effort in support of the push for Baghdad. We've seen column after column after column of vehicles. Now, they've been passing through this area on their way on various routes up to Baghdad over the course of recent days. Remember, of course, that supply chain goes way back down, hundreds of miles down to the Kuwaiti border, ultimately back to bases such as Camp Commando in Kuwait. This, of course, is bringing supplies up to the forward positions. Remember that no army is ever going to go to war without ammunition and without food. So we're seeing stockpiles of the ration packs, MREs as the Americans would call them, stockpiles of water, stockpiles of ammunition, all being loaded up and moving constantly up towards the frontline positions.
Let's bring in our two defence analysts at this point. Lisa, for the moment, stand by with your pictures of that explosion. We'll come back to you. Francis, can we pinpoint where these pictures are from?
We certainly were told the lead task force of 3rd Mechanised Infantry Division coming up from the south was on something called Route or Highway 8, coming directly from this. Motoring at, what are they doing, 25 kilometres an hour, occasionally brassing up targets at the side of the road. In British military terms, what would you call this?
Well, it's a bit difficult to know. I mean, I guess it is. It really is reconnaissance by going and having a look and seeing what's going on. So rather than sending in a small force, as perhaps they did in Mogadishu, and getting that brass off, they go up with a very large force. If it gets into trouble, it's big enough to fight its way out. And that's really what they're doing. So this is a very large foot, if you like, in the water. And I think they're sending in something that is big enough to see what's going on and to get out if it really comes into real big trouble.
And potentially to hold its position if needed?
Well, indeed, and it is, if you like, a rather smaller idea of what 3 Mech Infantry Division did right in the very beginning. Go on as far and as fast as they possibly can. And that's what they appear to be doing here.
Colonel, in layman's terms, what that looks like to me is a city that's been defeated, an army that's been defeated.
It is being defeated, certainly at the moment, but as I say, you know, city centre, I don't know how far they are from the city centre, 2-3 miles, and you know, always before them there's this thought that perhaps there is the Republican Guard, and perhaps they are pulling in towards the city. By no means could they surround the whole city with Republican Guard, or even, you know, give them the sort of frontage that they need to fight across the whole of the city. So do we see that they are trading ground really for time, and is there more of them in the city?
But if you were driving or in charge of that tank at the moment, you'd be pretty happy with the lack
I'd be
of
absolutely delighted.
you're facing.
Indeed, and you can see that they're moving at a hell of a lick.
Should point out we did see earlier one M1 A1 that seemed to have received a hit in the engine or something, which was being towed.
Yeah. It looked very much
tank
to me as if it was a much overheating engine that's brewed up.
But there was a slight fire which we saw earlier. Certainly there was a picture of one Iraqi reconnaissance armoured car, BRDM-2, had been hit. There seemed to be one piece of footage showing a civilian car which looked, from what we saw, as if there had been people in it trying to attack, because it was engaged pretty quickly by a number of the gunners. It's certainly an aggressive push.
And I'd seen earlier, while there was some talking going on, that there'd been some sort of a white van in flames coming very fast towards the troops and being fired on. And I guess this may be the start of what Saddam was talking about, or his information minister was talking about, those sort of possible unconventional means. And so I think
there's another truck there we're seeing on the feed,
Yeah.
similar perhaps.
I think that those tankers can expect more people to try and ram them with explosive-filled cars or some such. I don't think they'll do an awful lot of damage, and indeed they will very soon begin to see that if some car is coming towards them at speed, it will get hit with machine gun fire at the best.
Just looking at the pictures here and trying to make a comparison with a relatively detailed Baghdad map, we think that this area here is in the suburb of Darwa, south, and expecting them to escort them directly to where a US armoured column is quietly camping on the crossroads. we should bear in mind that if this is what we think it is, it's a battalion group, 650, 700 people, perhaps 30 to 50 vehicles. It's not that big.
Mike Vickery, can I ask you just in military terms how you start securing a city the size of Baghdad?
Well, it's very difficult to do it in military terms, and really without going into a sort of an old-fashioned Berlin type situation, it's not something that you can do militarily. And therefore, rather like Basra, you will have to rely on a mixture of military and political and local talking to people, and it will have to break its way down from the inside outwards, rather than having to take that city. If they wish to take that city, then it will be done with large amounts of firepower and large amounts of air power, and that's not what they want.
These troops we're watching now, for instance, with this armoured column going in now, will it go in and find an area it thinks it can secure and then build its base around there and then push a bit further and so on?
I would expect that that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to move in to see what sort of level of resistance they're getting. Are they going to meet massed tanks around Hyde Park, or are they going to meet a whole bunch of soldiers poking their guns out of the windows of the Cavalry and Guards Club, firing at them with rifles? This is really what what they're trying to see. They don't know. There is no real way, apart from the special forces, which are probably in there telling them to a certain extent what's going on. There's no real way that they can find out. So move in there with force.
There's a whole firefight going on here. You can see rounds pinging off the road.
Now, I think
this is truck coming towards them. Obviously concerned. It looks, partly because of the colour and so forth, as if potentially a military truck. And there's people bailing out from the driver's door. Difficult to tell from that shot, but this is very much far on the move.
Extraordinary footage.
Trying to match that up with a guide of Baghdad.
Obviously passing trucks that they think have been abandoned and putting a few rounds in to make sure there's no one there.
These soldiers are still standing up in their turrets here, and of course you have to stand up in the turret of an M113 or such to fire the 50 Browning machine gun, which is really the sort of weaponry that they're using at the moment.
Now check out the action. Basically, we've been destroying military vehicles on either side of the convoy. You can see smoke scattered about the horizon. We've seen military vehicles. We've also seen a lot of civilian white pickup trucks come at us almost on suicide missions. Fire returned by Bradley fighting vehicles as well as tanks. Now, some of these vehicles that have come at us were clearly civilian vehicles that did not mean hostile intent. In those cases, we saw warning shots fired. The operators of the armored vehicles waving their hands, go back, and they returned to where they were coming from uninjured. But a lot of those vehicles were coming at us clearly with hostile intent. For now, the cleanup really of Baghdad is underway, trying to get out remnants of the Medina division, any other Republican Guard who are here. We're told that a Republican Guard general is now in custody. We can't tell whether he is telling this soldier that's a gas mask, and he's got green trousers on. That's definitely a soldier, telling him to lay down his weapon and get on the deck. The first time we've seen that.
There's a guy that's right there in the bushes.
Watch out, there's a guy, don't shoot him. Another surrender. They're both keeping their hands up. Unbelievable. Now, a lot of these soldiers, though, didn't give up like that. They came at us with rocket-propelled grenades, AK-47s. One tank has been secondary explosions in these vehicles on either side of the road. They were destroyed by some of the tanks in front of us. Either their fuel tanks or munitions inside continue to explode as we pass by. But once again, this...
Pictures watching there. The man you just heard was Greg Kelly from Fox News, as he just introduced himself. This is what's known in television as raw television footage. We haven't had a chance to edit this. This is as we get it. So if there are pictures you find disturbing, we apologise, but it is full-on combat pictures, as you can see.
Should say you could see out the corner there that someone was pointing really looked like a...
Got a lip.
Mike Vickery, we're always saying that you're a former tank regiment commander, so you, more than anyone sitting here in the studio, will know what this feels like, especially from your experience of the first Gulf War. And you've said before, this is extraordinary speed that they're going at. Did you, at any point in the former Gulf War, actually ever move at this sort of speed when the enemy were around?
Yes, indeed we did, but we have to remember that we were moving across open desert. There was never, in any time, any sort of this kind of close-in fighting. When we fought them, it was right out in the middle of the desert. Sometimes they were in a defensive position, sometimes they were moving around trying to avoid us, but there was nothing quite so close in as this. But in terms of speed, yes, we moved really very fast indeed. And that's what armoured vehicles